Well, I guess this means that about half as many people have sunny yards as had shady yards. No, I know sun is not as much of a challenge as shade is, but thought it'd be a good chance to kind of give equal time to those people who wish they had more shade, and just to talk a little bit about some of the unique problems and some of the things that need to keep in mind when gardening in the sun. I want to talk a little bit about just some general principles, and then we'll go over a bunch of plants. I just have Patrick put a number of colorful things in here. Come on in.
Can I still get in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't slam the door unless it's real windy. But yes.
Today's the first day of the opening of the museum breach.
Oh yes,
That's where people are.
Okay. Well, it's getting to be that time of year. There's a lot going on. I mean,
Yeah.
people heading out on vacation and just lots of fun things going on, and all the people in the hill country are cleaning up after that hailstorm. I think it's incredible. If you don't think hail can be damaging, what hit up there north of Bernie, it's just that whole area. They're just acres of trees without a single leaf on them.
Oh.
And I understand I have a friend that's with EMS out of Bernie, and she said that they've had lots of calls with people getting badly cut up with glass when their windshields blew out when they tried driving through the hailstorm. They had a semi and bunches of cars, and said driving up on hailstones is just like driving on ice, which you don't do. And I noticed when I was out that way, lots of big ruts out there. Anyway, be thankful we don't have to talk much about dealing with hail here in town, but yeah, there's a lot going on. But we can have a tough time with areas that are really sunny in this part of the world. You combine that with our poor soils, you combine that with our shallow soils, and that can make for some challenges with dealing with things in the sun. And so I want to talk in general about a few of the things about gardening in the sun. Number one, water is more of an issue because, of course, in that much sun, you're going to evaporate the water out more quickly. The plants are going to transpire a lot more moisture. And in a lot of our areas, we just don't have real deep soils to begin with. But it does mean that you need to be watering properly. We had a fella in, I guess last week, with a bunch of grass that looked really lousy, and he was watering fairly often, but he was only watering for about 15 minutes at a time. And it's bad in any situation, but it's especially bad in a sunny landscape, because if you water, come on in, for just a short period of time, you're moistening the upper layer of the soil only. When you moisten the upper layer of the soil only, where is your grass, where are your plants going to put the majority of their roots? They're going to put them right on the surface of the ground. What's going to happen when we go from those nice 70-degree spring days, I think we had at least 2 or 3 of those, to the 95 and 100-degree summer days? That soil just bakes. And if your roots are all the way up right there on top of the ground, your plants are very definitely going to be stressed. If you water properly, by watering thoroughly so that you're soaking that water several inches deep into the ground, then you've got a nice deep root system, and your plants don't show nearly as much stress when we do get into the hotter weather. Now, interestingly enough, this particular person got him to switch the watering, and said in just a very short period of time, things started looking a whole lot better. And one of his points that I was glad he was smart enough to figure out, we tell people all the time, is that part of the yard was sloping. And he said, well, if I water more than 15 minutes, the water seems to just kind of start running off. Well, if you have a modern timer on your sprinkler system, not necessarily a modern sprinkler system, but a modern timer on your sprinkler system, it allows you a lot more option in how you set the sprinklers to run. Now, granted, I will probably have to find a 4th grader somewhere to program that thing for me, but if you have a sloping yard and you need to water for an hour at a time, but the water starts running off after 30 minutes or something, set that timer, set that system to come on and run for 30 minutes, run through each zone and run for 30 minutes, and then go back and run through the second zone again. Because if you did water for a full hour, yeah, a lot of that water might run off. But if you put half your water on, then it cycles through the other system, other parts of the system, Then when it goes back to that original first zone, all that water is soaked in, and you can apply a bunch more water and have it soak in a whole lot more deeply. Does that make sense? It's just rather than standing there and trying to water on the slope, coming back and watering 2 or even 3 times, which most of the newer sprinkler systems will allow you to soak that ground really deeply. And in sunny areas, it's just really going to be critical to getting things to do well. Another really important thing, and I think this goes anywhere, but in the sunnier areas, in your beds and around your trees and things like that, a good mulch is so important. A mulch does a lot in conserving moisture because it cuts down on evaporation, but one of the most important things a mulch does is to keep the soil cooler. Malcolm Beck did a bunch of experiments a few years back. I need to probably repeat them just for the heck of it. But he had a piece of soil that was out in the open, and then he had a similar piece of soil out in the open that he put 3 inches of mulch on top of. Went out on a hot sunny day with a soil probe and took the temperature in the 2 sunny areas. The open exposed soil, the said temperature was about 98 degrees or something like that. The soil that was out in the open, the temperature was around 145 degrees. And anybody wants to know how that happens, just walk across the beach barefoot in the middle of the summer and you'll figure out how hot things can get. But the soil that was out in the open was like 145 degrees. The soil under the mulch was something like 78 to 80 degrees. Now, where do you think the roots of your plants are going to be happier? Mulching really makes a difference, not just on cutting down evaporation, but just keeping the soil that much cooler. You get a much, much healthier root system. So on your trees, on your shrubs, around your perennials, sometimes a little tougher with annuals, but around trees and shrubs and things, it'll make all the difference in the world if you have a real sunny yard to keep it fairly heavily mulched. Now, there are lots of different kinds of mulch. There's no such thing as bad mulch, but some mulches are very definitely better than others. If you've got a big area to do and you're on a tight budget, you can go out to the brush dump out here on Bitters Road. You get virtually all the brush or all the mulch you want free of charge. But realize that there may be other things like poison ivy and things ground up in it. So do wear some rubber gloves or something when you're spreading it. Had a customer in one day that had found out the very hard way that there was a lot of poison ivy in the mulch she got after she got down and did this to spread it out. So I'll just let the visuals settle in there and just tell you to, again, not leather gloves, but rubber gloves. Just good heavy-duty dishwashing gloves will protect you from that kind of thing. The better mulches will have compost mixed in with them. And if you want to make your own, that's why we call them living mulches. They have the compost, so they have a lot of microbial life in them. If you want to make your own living mulch, you can certainly do so. You can get your free mulch, so to speak, and mix compost with it. Maybe 1 part compost to 6 or 8 parts of mulch, and you'll end up with a very good mulch. If you want just a basic, ground tree and bark mulch, if you know a tree trimmer, and I know a lot of y'all use Ed Eder and people like that, but call and say, I live in such and such a part of town. If you want to get rid of a load of chippings, I'd love to have you come, dump it on my driveway or whatever. When Ed or any other tree trimmer gets a full truck, he has to pay, to unload it. They call it a tipping fee. Whether he goes to Gardenville or New Earth or wherever, he has to pay to unload that. And so a lot of times, if you know a good tree trimmer and you'll know that there's not anything bad in that material, tell them just dump a load of it in your yard, and it's a great way to get some good free mulch. Mix some compost with it, and you'll have, a very good mulch. If you want to buy a mulch, this Ladybug Sylvan formula is the best that we have found because it has a lot of compost in it. He also puts some minerals in it, and the mulch itself is at least partially composted. So it's a great mulch. It's an expensive mulch. If you have just a little bit to do, it's certainly worth the price to get a really good mulch. If, like I say, you have a big area, you're on a tight budget, get the cheapest mulch you can find and improve it by adding some compost to it. And your plants will do a whole lot better out in the sun. Now, the one exception on mulching things in the sun, there are a few real drought-loving plants that don't like too much moisture. Mountain laurel is one. The so-called Sinisa or purple sage is another. These plants don't like a mulch that holds a lot of moisture around the roots. It would still help to mulch, but in that case, use something like granite sand, the decayed granite like is right here on the pathway. Great mulch to put around that kind of plant. It will help with abating the soil temperature without holding a lot more moisture.